A recent article was released in Quebec that absolutely blew up, that got the residents of the area completely on fire, incredibly upset, so much so to the point that the local deputy for Mirabel had to close her constituency office because of threats to her and her staff's safety. All of this was a result of new updated floodplain maps showcasing various areas that had been updated that are of high risk of flooding due to recent events. The flood zone issue has become highly contentious in several regions of Quebec, and revising the flood zones following recent disasters means that 15,500 buildings are now in high-risk areas in the Greater Montreal region, doubling the previous amount. Quebec announced that in June that 77,000 housing units may be affected by the new regulations, triple the current number. Municipal officials fear that some homeowners' properties will lose all of their value. Now, naturally, that put the residents of Montreal into a complete panic. And this got me thinking about the residents of British Columbia, the area that me and my real estate team serve and help people buy and sell homes in all the time. The current reality in British Columbia is that our floodplain maps are completely outdated and embarrassingly so. In fact, near my home where I live in South Surrey, British Columbia, we're near something called the Nickel River. And featured on the province's website is a floodplain map from 1994, which is, if you're paying attention and listening to this podcast of the day it was recorded, is 30 years old. 30 years old. How much has happened in British Columbia, even in the last 3 to 4 years, with severe weather events where we have seen massive amounts of flooding throughout our province? And these outdated maps, well, they leave home buyers with a ton of uncertainty, and homeowners too. This means that not only people living in homes in British Columbia, but also people looking to buy homes in British Columbia are working with incredibly outdated information, and information that they lack might cost them very dearly down the road. In today's podcast, I'm going to talk a little bit about the floodplain maps, the risks of living in a floodplain, and how that might affect your current property's value or your future property's value, and why that's so important to understand what might be coming down the road. If you're interested in hearing all about that and that all sounds good, well, let's continue on. If you don't know who I am, my name is Darin. I'm the team leader of the Germyn group, and we are a top-selling real estate team serving the Surrey, BC, White Rock, BC, and surrounding municipalities. Our team has helped hundreds and hundreds of people just like you buy or sell homes. So if you find yourself looking for help, please be sure to reach out for us, and we will do everything we can to make sure it is the best experience possible. All right, so the BC government has released something called From Flood Risk to Resilience, a BC flood strategy to 2035, outlining steps to create a modern, provincially coordinated floodplain mapping system. And this is really going to impact homeowners, investors, and communities in general. Not that it's a bad thing. We really need it, but the impact, well, it can be pretty huge. You see, roughly about 200,000 BC properties are considered to be at high risk for flood potential. And in fact, it is the third highest province in all of Canada for flood risk potential. The government's new strategy aims to help better prepare and protect these areas through updated mapping and rebuilding standards. And I know what you're thinking. Some of the common misconceptions about these floodplain areas is, well, these areas haven't flooded in hundreds and hundreds of years. There's no way that they should be designated as a flood zone. But you also might be in the camp that you're a little bit worried. You might have a concern that your property is located in a flood zone, or maybe you don't even know about it. And once these areas remap showing these high-risk areas, well, your property, it could stand to lose a lot of value. Someone named Aaron Sutherland from the Insurance Bureau of Canada quoted, "With over 200,000 BC households at high risk, this new report by the Government of British Columbia details its commitment to developing a provincially coordinated floodplain mapping program and breaks down the steps the government plans to take to establish and coordinate a multi-year floodplain mapping program to build back better pre- and post-disaster and to move people and buildings from flood-prone areas." And this report details 4 pathways the province will take to enhance flood resilience in the short and long term as follows. Number 1, understanding flood risk. 2, strengthening flood risk governance. 3, enhancing flood preparedness, response, and recovery. And number 4, investing for flood resilience. This strategy is incredibly important to help better protect families, people in our communities, and their investments. What I love about what they're saying here is that these maps will also be updated every 10 years. So there will never be a situation like the Nikomakil River map near my home where it is 30 years old and our weather patterns and climate have changed so substantially since then. Homeowners effectively would now have regularly updated access to updates and have better understanding of how their current property might be affected. But with that also potentially comes some financial implications. Areas newly marked as flood-prone may see property devaluation, but at the same time, these maps may offer potential buyers a clearer, more realistic view of the risks of owning such properties. Unfortunately, real estate and insurance markets may adjust premiums and prices based on this updated data. This, like in Montreal and Quebec, might get some significant pushback from the communities once they really start to understand the implication of these updated flood maps. This could be from homeowners worried about their property's valuations and the long-term stability of their home. This could also relate to municipalities related to rezoning of certain areas or even just the cost of infrastructure. There also might be some challenges down the road in reselling some of these properties. There is cities and municipalities across North America where there's actually a requirement for the real estate industry to disclose flood risks and also what might happen in, let's say, the next 100 years in terms of sea level or flood risks for a particular area or home. Probably something we should look at doing in British Columbia as well once we have these new updated flood maps. So here's the hard truth. There's many parallels to this article coming out of Quebec to what we deal with here in British Columbia. There might be an intense backlash from the property owners seeing their values plummet or property becoming unsellable due to high flood risk designations. Of course, homeowners seeing their equity drop would completely have them terrified. I guess the question is this potential offset in the drop of their property values better to protect not only them, but also their community, but also the people buying in their community? Does that outweigh the problems that this might create? For those considering purchasing a home, floodplain mapping and understanding your location in relation to a floodplain is absolutely critical. And once these new floodplain maps are released, we're going to encourage not only our home buyers, but also anybody that owns a home to use these maps not as a negative or a deterrent, but as a tool to better educate yourself and encourage you to regularly check them for updates. BC's commitment to update these maps every 10 years once they're released will ensure that nobody's left in the dark as conditions evolve with climate change. This is definitely something that if you're a homeowner listening to this, you're going to want to pay attention to. You're also going to want to remember that if you're someone considering buying a home, you're going to want to make sure that the real estate professional helping you purchase that home is very well educated on flood risks in the area you choose to call home. That's critical and crucial about working with a local area expert. And this podcast, as well as our YouTube channel, is dedicated to things just like this, to make sure that you are informed about everything going on with real estate. So if you're interested in everything going on in British Columbia real estate, you're definitely going to want to follow this podcast for future episodes. As a community, I think it's important that we are proactive to this approach regarding floodplain mapping. And I want to remind you that flood preparedness is everyone's responsibility. Having the knowledge that these new updated maps will provide is crucial for individual safety and property protections. I can't stress enough that you need to understand these things. And as mentioned earlier, when you are buying a home anywhere in the Lower Mainland, you need to understand the flood risks before you commit to that property. These updated maps will be absolutely critical to that process to making sure you know exactly what you are buying. No one wants to face a financial strain or a potential devaluation based on the property they buy. Investigating whether your property currently or the property that you want to purchase in the future is located in a floodplain might help save you a ton of headache and help you avoid a situation like the residents of Mirabel and Greater Montreal experienced with their most recent floodplain map updates. I hope you learned something today. My name is Darin Germyn with Macdonald Realty and the Germyn Group out of Surrey, BC, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks for listening.